Hey guys,
Hey everybody.
welcome to another Sunday evening Travel Therapy Mentor live video. Today we're going to be talking about probably the question we get the most often, which is which travel companies are the best, or which travel company is the best. And the reason we haven't really touched a whole lot on this so far is because there's no good answer to this question. And so we're going to try to go through this a little bit, help you guys navigate those waters, because when we were new travelers, we had the exact same question. And hopefully we can shed a little bit of light on it, talk about some of the challenges in trying to find the best companies or even really good companies. And hopefully you guys can make better decisions than we did. So Whitney's going to introduce us, and then we'll get into the topic.
All right, everybody. So for those that may not know us, my name is Whitney Aiken.
And I'm Jared Kazazzo.
And we are both traveling physical therapists. We are the faces behind the Travel Therapy Mentor website. And some of you guys may also recognize us from our personal blog, which is fifthwheelpt.com. So tonight we're coming at you live again from our car office in the parking lot of the gym because we just got, if you guys are following our story, we just arrived at our new travel assignment location here in North Carolina about a week and a half ago, maybe 10 days ago. And we're staying in our RV in our fifth wheel, and we have not gotten our internet set up yet at our camper. So we kind of get spotty service in and out there at the camper and no Wi-Fi just yet. So we are bumming off of our gym's Wi-Fi in the parking lot, just like last week. So we've got this lovely neon glow from the car light. So hope you guys can see us and hear us okay. So like Jared said, tonight we're going to talk a little bit about recruiters and choosing different companies and that sort of thing. We want to hear from you guys. If you're watching, I see a few of you are joining in live with us, and Jared is going to share our video in a few of our Facebook groups to try to get more people joining in live with us tonight. If you are watching live, we'd love if you would just say hello in the comments. And if you're watching later on the replay as well, we'd love if you'd say hello and let us know who you are. I see that Jeff is in here. Hi, Jeff. Hi, Ryan. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. If anybody else is watching, we would love to hear from you. Are you a current traveler? Are you someone who's looking into travel therapy? Ryan Kirtley, sponsored by Gold's Gym. Yes, it is actually Gold's Gym, which is funny.
Gold's Gym.
Hi, Nikki. Thank you for joining us. Hey, Jeff. Yeah, we'd love to hear from you guys that are watching. We'd love to know, are you students? Are you current therapists that are looking to start travel therapy? Are you already traveling? I know Jeff and his girlfriend are on their very first travel assignment, which is exciting. So probably a lot of you guys are new or aspiring travel therapists, I would imagine. And you guys probably have the same question that we did when we got started traveling is, how do we find which companies to work with? Like which companies should we work with? We hear there's hundreds of them. How do you choose? So for you guys that may or may not be so familiar with our story, we have been traveling physical therapists for 4.5 years, which means it's been a little over 5 years since we first started looking into the whole travel therapy world and doing research. We really started actually thinking about travel therapy back when we were in physical therapy school, like end of first year, beginning of second year. So that would have been in 2014 or so. We started looking into travel therapy, 2013 even.
Yeah.
So it was like late 2014, early 2015 that we started actually researching companies and trying to find information about what travel therapy was. And as we've said many times back, that was 4 or 5, 6 years ago, there wasn't as much information as there is now out there, which is a big reason why we started our blog and then later started our Travel Therapy Mentor website.
Yeah, that was a frustrating thing for me because I really like to thoroughly research things before I make decisions, and there was just so little information out there that I was getting information from like forums and stuff that was outdated, and nursing groups and stuff like that. But for travel therapy in general, which there's definitely some differences between travel therapy and nursing, there was no good information. So yeah, a lot has come out since then, and there's a lot more resources now, which is great.
Yeah. Hi, John. Thanks for joining us. Nikki says she's a current SLP traveler. She's on assignment in Augusta, Georgia. That's cool. Thank you, Nikki. And John says he's a new grad PT looking to get into travel. That's awesome. And I see Laura is joining us. I know Laura is a current student thinking about traveling after graduation, which should be coming up here in the next 6 months, I think. So kind of a good time to be thinking about companies. We started talking to companies and sort of researching them really seriously like 6 months before graduation, 6 months before we intended to travel. We started traveling right away as new grads. So kind of just talking about this whole process of how do you go about finding the best companies. What we did and what the majority of you will do is you just reach out to anyone that you know that was a traveler. Like that's like the only way, right? Like ask another traveler. Maybe it was a classmate, someone above you in school that also traveled, and you're like, oh, I guess, that guy might know something. Let me ask him. Or my friend is a traveler. Like maybe let me ask her.
Well, first let's talk about some of the challenges that come along with, finding a very good company or finding the best company when you're starting out. There are over 200 companies that staff travel therapists, and probably an additional 200 that staff travel nurses. So there are a lot of companies out there. So many companies that it's completely unrealistic to talk to all of them. You also, so basically, if you were going to interview companies, you can choose a few, but you can't talk to, more than maybe 7 or 8 realistically before you start traveling. So that's the big thing, is that there's so many companies that how do you narrow it down? The other big thing is that when you said, you talk to a current traveler or somebody that used to travel, everyone has an incentive to recommend the company and the recruiter that they work for. That means that whether the company is good or not, or whether the recruiter is good or not, a lot of times that traveler will try to send you to them because they would get a bonus from that. That is a good system for the travel companies to get people to, send people to them, but it's a very bad system for new travelers because you don't know. If somebody has an incentive to recommend something, you don't know if that recruiter or that company really is good or if it's not a good company. On top of that, a lot of new travelers don't have very much perspective about companies. Maybe they've only talked to 2 and they say, oh, okay, my 2 are great, but they don't have, they have no perspective to say that from. So that, unless you've talked to a lot, you don't know what, a really good recruiter or a really bad recruiter is. You don't know what a really good company is or a really bad company is. So there's that perspective issue. And that's something that takes a lot of time, a lot of talking to different companies to build that perspective, to be able to give, good insight into what a good and bad company would be.
Right. Hey, Bethany. Hey, Rachel. And hi, Mallory. Mallory says she and her wife are looking into getting started with travel therapy after graduation, and they are 3rd-year students. So that's awesome. As Jared mentioned, there's just a lot of challenges to navigating this whole thing. Like, how do I know if the people that my friend sends me to or this other traveler I know sends me to are even good?
Yeah.
And then even if I talk to them, like, how do I know? Because they're all kind of salesmen-like. Recruiters kind of tend to be salesmen. They're going to tell you all the best parts. And sometimes it's even hard to know just in having 1 or 2 conversations with them if they are any good until you've actually worked with them and taken a job with them or gone through the job search process with them and see how they do business and how they handle things. And even still, to be honest, once you're a newer traveler, the first couple contracts, the first couple years, you may not have a perspective to know if the way you experienced it was the best way it could have been. Like maybe you think, well, I'm making decent money and they seem nice and I liked the placements I got. Seems like a good recruiter, but you just don't know what you don't know because you haven't worked with anybody else to compare them and know, oh, I could have been making more, or, oh, I see. Maybe they were being a little shady with me and I just didn't realize it. Yeah,
we really struggle with this, not only in the beginning, because we reached out to a traveler, we got some recommendations. I think he gave us about 4 names, and a couple of those were good and a couple of those were not good. And in the beginning, it was very hard for us to figure out which of those companies to work with because we only reached out to one person. And we eventually figured out which ones were good, which ones weren't. But even then, so we picked the 2 of those 4 that we liked the most. We worked with them for the majority of our contracts. But then 2 years in, we'd only worked with 2 companies and talked to about 4 companies. So we had such limited perspective still. And this is back when I was writing the Fifth Wheel PT website. And, I was writing about travel therapy on there, and I'd have people reach out and ask me what companies I'd recommend. Well, I can only recommend the ones I've worked with, but I don't even know for sure that they're good companies. Mm-hmm. And it made me feel really uncomfortable recommending people to these recruiters and these companies that I really weren't sure that they were the best, because I'd heard other stories about, oh, well, this company pays really good, and this recruiter does all this stuff, and these benefits are way better. And, you hear all these stories, but you don't have the time to go through and interview all these companies. So really, when we started this website, we decided that I was basically looking for a solution. Like, how do you find a good company? How can I recommend with any certainty or any
confidence?
Yeah, any confidence what companies to work with. And basically what we came to the conclusion is it's unrealistic for an individual traveler to interview a couple dozen companies. But it's not unrealistic for us to do that. Now that we have some experience, we've already talked to, at this time, we'd probably talk to, 8 to 10. And then I was like, hey, you know what? If we just keep systematically reaching out to new companies, new recruiters, try to find which ones are actually legit, which ones are good, we have more knowledge now, then hopefully we can build a list of companies and recruiters that we like based on different factors, and then have some confidence in what we're recommending to people instead of just being like, all right, well, I work with these two, I recommend these two. Right. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. And so that's really what we've done this last year, is reach out to a bunch of companies, a bunch of recruiters, interview them, try to find the ones that are good for different scenarios. Because that's the other thing. I wrote an article about this recently that I wrote really in depth into all this stuff, and I can link it in the comments. You guys might be interested in that. But the other problem is, even if that person that you take recommendations from really does like their company, and they are a really good company, that does not mean that that company will be good for you. And the reason is because everyone has their unique situation. My example I used in the article was, maybe that person is a school-based therapist and they're working with a company that has a lot of school contracts. So that's great for them. But say you're an outpatient therapist and that company doesn't have a lot of outpatient contracts. If you get in contact with that recruiter, they're not going to just blatantly tell you, oh, we don't have that many outpatient jobs, you should go somewhere else, because they want your business. So they're going to say, well, this is all we have right now, choose from this. And what it might be is you might end up getting strung along for a while, get desperate, and then accept a job that's not as good for you. And we see that happen a lot. And that was a really frustrating thing for us. So we've done our best over this last year to try to find companies that, we like, that recruiters are good, that are good for different situations, so that we can recommend those to you guys. And hopefully over the years that will get better and better. We'll keep refining that process. But that's the problem with this question we get so much, is there's no good answer to it.
Right. So we want to get into talking about just some suggestions for you guys on how you can go as an individual, go about best trying to weed out and find the best companies. But basically what Jared's getting at is there isn't a great solution. And that's what we're trying to combat with our website and our business. Now that we're not working full-time as travel therapists, we're taking contracts here and there, and we're focusing a lot more on building our website and providing content and education to you guys. We have a lot of the time. I have spent numerous hours on the phone with several different companies, several different recruiters, to try to learn the best ones. We've actually also crowdsourced, so we've talked to other travelers that we've met throughout our 4.5 years of being travel therapists and learned which companies they've liked. We've been in a lot of the Facebook groups and the forums, listening and reading for years about which companies people tend to like school-based therapists versus West Coast versus East Coast, that kind of thing. And then I've gone and, researched those companies myself, called them, gotten set up with a recruiter there, decided whether that was a company we wanted to work with or not, asked them about what their typical pay tends to be, what their benefits are like, and all that. And I have a spreadsheet of the ones that we recommend. And I would say of several dozen that we've talked to or interviewed or met, we recommend about 9 or 10 that we like. And that list is still growing. Over time, we want to get to know more companies. Now, granted, we always tell people, I haven't talked to all 200 of them. If somebody comes to me and says, hey, I heard of such and such company, are they any good? And if I don't have experience with them personally or through a direct friend or colleague, I can't say one way or the other whether they're good or not. I always try to tell them what I'm going to get into next. What I'm going to get into next is for you guys to find ways to personally vet or interview companies to decide if they're right for you. So what I always tell people, if I haven't heard of them, I'm like, if you feel like they're good and you have a good relationship with them, ask them these questions and decide whether they seem right for you. And if they are, then that's great. You don't have to go with one of the companies, one of the 10 or so that I like. That just happens to be the 10 or so that we've decided seem pretty good for various reasons.
Yeah. And another thing there is, even if you find the very best company, you might not get along with the recruiter that we get along with. And we've had that exact situation where we had, at one point, we'd been traveling for a while, and we had several other travelers recommend a recruiter to us that they said was great. And we didn't like that person as much. And, there's differences in personality. So not only is the company important, but the recruiter is very important, and maybe even more important than the company in some cases. So you not only have to find the company that works well for you, but you have to find a recruiter that you get along well with and that they're responsive and all that. Another big factor that we've been really trying to find a solution to, I guess, is where certain companies have exclusive jobs. So there are some really small companies that you guys, or us too, would never really hear of because they don't do a lot of marketing. They're very small. And they have some of these niche markets in certain areas of the country or certain settings where they have a lot of exclusive jobs. Well, that's wonderful for travelers that find those companies and want to be in that niche market. But the issue is, how do you find them? And so we've been spending a lot of time trying to find these small companies that have exclusive contracts in areas where other people might want to go. So say like we have a company that has a lot of exclusive contracts in Virginia, North Carolina, Maryland, that area. That's the area we like. But, we have a lot of people that want to go to Washington, Oregon area. Well, we don't know any companies that have exclusive contracts there. So the more we reach out, the more companies we talk to.
Well, we didn't, but now we do.
Yeah, hopefully we can make more of those connections.
We do now. We finally found one. But so Bethany had a question. She says, when you're asking about pay, like when we're talking to companies and interviewing them, do we only ask about PT? No, not necessarily. So back when I was only searching for companies for ourselves, yes. Now that we're sort of interviewing and getting to know different companies, in order to make recommendations to all of you guys, we definitely try to ask about the pay across the board. Typically, prior to these PDPM changes, what they were telling us was that PT, OT, and speech was generally about the same across the board. I think what we're starting to see with the market being lower for the OT is that the rates are going to be a little bit lower. And it's not always exact numbers. They can't ever give exact numbers because it depends very much on the setting and the location of the job.
And the specific facility.
For sure. And I feel like in general, the trend I'm seeing is, we always say like 1,500 is the minimum that most PT jobs are going to be. And then they could go anywhere up to 2,000 plus. I do feel like the OT jobs sometimes are more like 1,400. Sorry, car lights went off. 1,400 might be the low end of the OT jobs. I would say the OT jobs tend to be 100 or 200 behind the PT jobs in certain settings, in certain locations. Yeah. But that's just a generalization.
Yeah, and it's really hard when you're asking companies about pay, like when you're trying to interview a company and a recruiter. They can't, all they can give is averages. Like, so they might say, we'll ask a question like, what is an average pay you see on the East Coast for a PT? What is an average pay you see on the West Coast for an OT? Like those kind of questions, so that we can get a little bit of an average. But, a lot of that is just estimates, because every job's going to differ. Like Whitney said, location, settings are all going to be different.
Lisa said the video for her is buffering a lot. There's a very good chance it is our internet. Can y'all let us know, the other people that are watching, is the video buffering for you, or are we lagging? Again, we are in the gym parking lot using the Wi-Fi because our Wi-Fi is not set up at our camper yet. So there's a very good chance it is our internet, but can somebody else let us know?
Hopefully not.
And if so, I apologize. We'll do our best. So we do want to get into talking about like when you guys are going and searching for companies. Now we've done other like what things you should be looking for. Hold on real quick. So Bethany had a follow-up question. Bethany says, do you feel like it's a red flag if they won't even give you an average? They should know. That's very true. Pretty much across the board, my recruiters that we talk to will be able to give an average for sure. Like they'll usually say, I think I have written down in my spreadsheets, like, okay, the average for the PT might be between 1,500 to 1,900, but if it's on like the Bay Area, it's going to be like 17 to 2,000, and then the OT, that sort of thing.
They should always know an average or a general range. Like I can't think of any recruiter that we've ever talked to that couldn't give us a range for location. So if they won't give you that is probably
there are some recruiters that are just weird about that, Bethany, and I hate that. I hate when they say like, oh, I can't really say, or I don't really want to predict like what your taxes are going to be because everybody's taxes are different. I'm like, there's averages, and that, I don't know, 75% of your travelers are filing single and zero unless they have a family.
Not only that, they can ask you that. A good recruiter will say, okay, are you going to be filing single and zero, single and one, you have a family? Like
they can plug those
make
numbers
estimates,
in. There's this one company that we work with that we have a really good relationship with the owner, because it's a small company based in the DC area, and we're from Virginia, so he has always been really good for us on the East Coast. For our little region of Virginia, DC, North Carolina, where we like jobs. So we have a really good relationship with him, and he's the CEO. He's the owner of the company. So we learn a lot from him, and he'll honestly sit there on the phone with me and just real quick in 30 seconds crunch numbers. He'll be like,
they'll say $65 bill rate. Okay, that would be this. It would be probably $1,820 to $1,840 a week.
And he's within $50 of like, oh yeah, it might be this, and most of these jobs are going to be, and I know this client might pay a little bit more if you have experience or whatever, and that's where he has 14 plus years experience and is a business owner. Now, if you catch a new recruiter and they don't know all that, like, they might not be as quick with it, but they should be able to give you an estimate. Everybody says the video seems pretty good, Lisa, so it might just be your internet. And I'm glad to hear. Sorry your internet's not working, but I'm glad ours is doing okay for everybody. Off topic a little bit, we're kind of going off on a side tangent here, but Nikki says, I've also experienced that a lot. Bethany says, if we can calculate the pay, they should also be able to, if they don't take that step, it tells me the level of effort they're going to put into our relationship. That makes so much sense.
That's a good point. Let's
segue into talking about just some things that you guys might look for when you are going through this process of finding recruiters. Now, we're going to talk about, like, how do you even find the companies to look for? But once you do find the companies to look for, and you have a list of names, like these are the ones I want to interview, you want to take into account your personal situation. What settings and locations are you looking for? Can this company offer that? What, are they seeing a lot of PT jobs? Are they seeing a lot of OT jobs? Are they seeing a lot of assistant jobs? If you're an assistant, are they willing to place assistants? Because right now in this market, a lot of them are like, I'm not really messing with assistants because there's just not enough jobs, and that's unfortunate, but you need to know that going in. Some other factors you might consider are, what's the pay range like? Does the company provide mentorship? There's so many factors to think about. That's why we can't ever say, like, this is the best company for you. If you have 10 years of experience and all you need is a high paycheck, I'm going to recommend a different company to you than if you're a new grad and you really need a strong mentorship and a really strong placement in a certain setting so you're going to be successful. And you care about the pay, but that's not the top priority.
Yeah, and any of you guys that have contacted us asking for recommendations, we will never just give blanket recommendations. We always want more information about your personal situation because, like Whitney's saying, there is no one size fits all for everybody. You need more information about the person to be able to make any sort of valid suggestions or recommendation.
Right.
So I guess we can talk about some of the ways that you probably should not go about finding a recruiter or company. And I would say number one on that list of ways not to is going off of a cold call. So
if you guys don't know what a cold call is, if you're new to this industry, a cold call is where you just have an email from some recruiter you've never heard from, or a phone call from some recruiter you've never heard of, some company. Hey, this is Stacy. I work at, Travelers R Us. Give me a call.
Yeah, it'll say something like, oh, so I saw you have a Virginia license. We have a lot of Virginia contracts. Give me a call. Don't talk to those. Okay, so let me qualify that a little bit. Some of those recruiters are new and they're great people and they're trying to build their caseload. Some of those recruiters are not very good, and that's why they don't have that many travelers working for them. So that's why they're trying to do these cold calls. So you're taking a very big gamble there, and I would never go with someone from a cold call. The other thing is conferences. So you go to a conference, you go to all these travel therapy company booths, and they all seem great, and you'll talk to them, and they'll scan your badge. So that's the thing, they scan your badge, right? And then they get your email address and your phone number, and that's where all those cold calls come from.
Right.
So you have to be very careful about that, because you go and talk to these companies, and they all sound great in person. And every recruiter, almost every recruiter, sounds great in person, because, like Whitney said, they're salespeople. They make commission off of travelers. So it's their job to try to sell themselves and sell the company. So you have to be careful about that.
So with that said, we just went to a conference. We just stood at a booth with a company we like.
Yeah.
We had another company there that we also like, and I'm sure the other ones that were there were great too. What we're saying is you just don't have any perspective to know whether they're great or not, because if they just call you out of the blue, they just get your name from some email list, whether it was a conference or they came to your school or your job fair, or you filled out some form online and you just got on their email list somehow. If they just call you or email you out of the blue, you just don't know if they're good or not, because you don't have anybody vouching for them, more or less. They could be brand new. They might not have any experience. They might not be a good recruiter, so they're looking for clients because they don't have anybody sending them referrals. They don't have any clients. So there's just no way to really know. And so that's probably the worst way to find a company or a recruiter.
That's a really good point. So when you're talking about going to that conference, we know for sure that a couple of those companies there were really good. We also know that there was a couple companies there that were not so good from our experience. A new person there, like a student walking around going to those booths, would have no idea or no way to distinguish those ones that we know are good from the ones that we know weren't.
Right.
So you go up to it, they seem the same. The recruiters are going to seem like they really care about you, really want to get you placed.
They're going to say we offer benefits, we offer relocation, we offer licensing reimbursement, we
can find
offer
housing for
stipends,
you.
we'll find housing for you. Guess what? They can all do that, because they'll be like, oh, this one sounded great. They came to my job fair. They were nice. They said they would pay me well. They had benefits. Yeah, they all pay well. They all have benefits.
So at a conference, you just have no way to distinguish, and that's the main thing. So cold calls, conferences are probably not the best place to
Low.
find.
And then ads.
Yeah.
Ads are also really low on the totem pole. Like, if you just Google a company and then ad is coming up a lot, that just means they spent more money on their marketing.
Yeah, so that's a big issue. Some of the companies that advertise the most are some of the worst companies. They'll spend a lot of money on marketing, and when you spend a lot of money on marketing, it means you don't have as much money to pay travelers, which means they pay very low. So you have to be careful about the companies that advertise a lot. And the bad part about that is the ones that advertise a lot are the ones that are seen the most, that have most travelers work for them. And those are usually the companies that are not that great. So be very careful about the ones that you see advertising everywhere.
Right.
Because that money's coming from somewhere, and it's coming from the paychecks of travelers.
Right. So just beware. Now, moving up from worst way to find a recruiter and company, closer to the best. Now, somewhere above cold calls and ads would be you going out of your way to Google search for reviews. This is a decent way to get some feedback and get some information. If you do a Google search, or you search on Indeed.com or something like that, and you read some reviews, or maybe some of the recruiters even come up on LinkedIn or something like that. If you're able to actually read reviews by people and see, like, oh, I'm consistently seeing that Travelers Are Us. I'm going to use that as a fake name, Bethany, you like that?
I bet you there is a company called Travelers.
If you're consistently seeing that Travelers Are Us does have a lot of good ratings, and you specifically see that, the recruiter Bethany at Travelers Are Us, a lot of people tend to like Bethany, well, okay, maybe that's not too bad. Maybe you give Bethany a call, and maybe she is a good recruiter.
Maybe they've got Black Friday sales too. It could be.
You don't know. So, that's not a terrible way to go about finding recruiters. It's definitely better than just going into it blind or just going off a cold call.
Yeah.
But it's still kind of hard because you don't necessarily know. Like, actually, I think sometimes in the opposite direction, we know just as well as anything else with different goods and different services, people tend to actually leave the bad reviews more than they leave the good reviews. So just because, Travelers R Us maybe has a bad review doesn't even mean they're a bad company. It's just hard to know. Did somebody take the time to go and praise their recruiter on there, or did they take the time to go when they had a bad experience and leave a review?
Yeah, and then on top of that, if you find a company like that, which I think that is a decent way to find companies, the ones that have the best reviews on those sites, especially if, obviously you want a company that has a lot of reviews, and most of them being good. But you still don't know what recruiter to work with at that company. And like I said, that can be even more important than the company in some cases. So you're still, even if you find a good company like that, another important thing to say there is, if you find a company that has good reviews, you want to work with that company, don't just go to that company website and fill out a form on their website. Because then you get put on their call list, and you get calls from every recruiter at that company that doesn't have basically a full caseload of travelers. Which is not what you want. The best recruiters are almost never making those cold calls because they already have a full caseload of referrals.
Yeah.
The ones that we refer to, a lot of them, you're not going to be getting cold calls from those people.
Yeah. So if you do want to go and read reviews online, and you do see a company that you like, or if you're looking for a specific job in a specific area and you see an advertisement for that job through a certain company, before you just go on their website and call the number or fill out the thing, I would go to a friend, a fellow traveler, or Facebook, and ask in a group, or ask us, like, hey, I heard this company was good. Do you know a recruiter there that you could recommend?
Yeah, and at least one person has had a good experience with that person.
Yes.
It's definitely better than nothing, like a random person contacting you.
Absolutely. So then the next level up from that, which we already talked about, would be going off recommendations. So going off recommendations from friends or people that you know that have traveled is great. And our opinion is the more experience they have, the better. If you just go to a traveler that's brand new, maybe they just graduated, or they've been traveling for 6 months or a year, they might have only worked with 1 or 2 companies. So they can give you a better recommendation than somebody who has no experience, but still their experience is going to be limited.
And you have to remember, like I said, everyone is incentivized to recommend their own companies that they work with. And I've seen situations where you'll have a traveler that has maybe been traveling for a few days or a week, and they say something like, I have the best recruiter ever. If you're interested in traveling, reach out to me. Well, how much possible perspective could that person have into all the travel companies and recruiters out there to say that, you know, theirs is wonderful and the best? They might really be great, but you haven't tried other ones to even know.
Yeah.
You know, that's the whole thing. So the more experience, the better, because
Right.
naturally, as you travel more, you talk to more companies, more recruiters, and you get more perspective on what's out there, who's good, who's not good, and all those things.
Right. So we definitely recommend try to get your get your recommendations from someone who has a lot of experience, preferably like 2+ years of experience at least, and find out, like, have you worked with multiple companies? Like, how do you know this one's a good one? Have you worked with multiple recruiters? Which is again why we're trying to do our best. You know, we used to just recommend 3 years ago, if you came to us and asked us for recommendations, we would just recommend the 3 that we knew.
Yeah.
But over the years now, we've interviewed a lot more and branched out. So we hope that we have a pretty good perspective if you guys do reach out to us for recommendations on all of these different ones that we've interviewed and talked to.
Yeah, and I know that some people watching this video will probably have reached out to me for recommendations a few years ago, and what I was giving out back then were not that good of recommendations, and it's just because I didn't know any better. I didn't know other companies or other recruiters that might be better. So
Right.
yeah, you have to be careful with that.
Yeah, so definitely just use your resources, use the communities. You know, Bethany's talking about the online community. We've grown and learned so much just from having these online Facebook communities. And, you know, our community now is growing in our travel therapy mentor community, and there's several other Facebook groups that have travel therapists in them. So use the community, try to take recommendations from travelers that have been around a while and worked with a few different companies and had good experiences and had bad experiences and done multiple rounds of job searches. That's going to give you the best insight for recommendations on which companies to choose. And then once you receive those recommendations, you know, say you talk to your friend who traveled, you talk to an experienced traveler, maybe you ask us for recommendations, kind of compile a little list. I would recommend trying to get a list of maybe 4 or 5 at least recruiters at different companies, and then you have the power from that point to interview them yourself. Have a phone conversation with 4 to 5 to 6 of them, and then once you talk to them and compare their benefits side to side, compare what pay packages and what jobs they're able to offer, and your relationship, how you get along with the personalities of those different 4 to 5 recruiters, then narrow it down to about 2 to 3 that you really think that you would like working with for your personal job searches.
Yeah, we're getting some questions. If you guys have questions, definitely feel free to ask. We like this to be more of a conversation than us just like throwing a bunch of information out there. It's always nice to get questions from you guys. Also, if you guys are getting value from this video, please like it and comment. The more engagement that we get, the more people see it. And I think this is an important topic. I mean, this literally is the most important. This is the most asked question that we get, even over things like pay, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so more people that see it, the better. Please like, comment.
We appreciate the thumbs up and the hearts that we get on our videos.
Yeah, so we got a question here, and this is kind of what I want to talk about next anyway. Mallory said, do you or how do you work with multiple recruiters at once?
Yeah.
This is a very important subject. Yes, we always recommend working with more than one recruiter, and there's a few reasons for that, but the biggest reason is that the more companies and recruiters that you work with, the more job options you have. You cannot find a great job for yourself if you don't have, you might be able to, but you have a much better chance of finding a great job for yourself if you have more options, right? You don't want to work with a company that has a couple outpatient jobs and they're like, well, I got this one or this one, you choose. You know, you want to have a broad range of options where you can go to maybe a location that's better for you, maybe a clinic that's better for you. The other big reason to work with more than one company is that when you work with multiple recruiters, they have an incentive to give you higher pay. They don't, okay, let me put it this way. If you're working with one company and one recruiter, they can give you a pretty low offer on pay, and they know that you don't have a lot of negotiating power. You don't have a lot of wiggle room. Let's say you need to find a job, they can give you a low offer, and if you take it, they can make more money off of you. On the other hand, say you're working with 3, they might give you that low offer, and then another recruiter gives you a higher offer, and you don't work with that person. You know, you don't work with that first one that gave you the low offer, so they lose out on your business. So if a recruiter knows that you're working with more than one company, more than one recruiter, then they are much more likely to give you a fair offer right off the bat. Obviously, if you're working with a reputable recruiter, someone that you can trust, hopefully you don't have to worry about that at all. But I can tell you for certain that recruiters are going to give higher pay, more fair pay offers, and also going to be more responsive when they know that you're working with multiple because they're competing. And hopefully that makes sense. So yes, always do it. It's no big deal. Any good recruiter understands that it's in your best interest to do that and that they are competing for your business.
Right. So with that said, a good recruiter will work harder by knowing you're working with multiple. A bad recruiter will put you in a position where they say, if you're going to work with other recruiters, I'm not going to work with you.
And if that ever happens, do not work with that person.
No.
That's not somebody you want to be around. Well, likely it's somebody that doesn't have a lot of experience in the industry. And but yeah, that's definitely not somebody you want to work with.
Yeah, and that's not very professional of them to act butthurt about you working with somebody else or act offended, because this is a business.
Butthurt, that is a professional term.
It very much is. This is a business, and they have to understand that you need to maintain continuous employment. You need to have back-to-back contracts in order to make the most money as possible. And they don't necessarily lose their job or lose money if you go a week or 2 weeks without a contract. So they need to be understanding that it's in your best interest for you to professionally work with multiple recruiters. And if they can't understand that, then that's not a recruiter you want to work with.
Yeah.
Now, in regards to how do you work with multiple recruiters at once? When we say work with, and we talk about this all the time, when we say work with, we mean communicate with. So you don't actually work for them, or you're not employed by them until you actually take a contract. Throughout the whole job finding process, we say work with, we just mean communicate with multiple recruiters at once that are submitting you for multiple jobs and presenting multiple job offers to you, and then you pick and choose which ones you want to have your profile submitted for. And then once you do some phone interviews with a couple of different ones, you decide which job you want to take, and then for that contract you work for that one company just for the duration of that contract. And then when you go to the next contract, you go back to the same deal. You're a free agent again. You can start communicating with your group of 3 or so recruiters, game planning for the next contract, and then on the next contract maybe you take a contract with that same recruiter again, or maybe you go with recruiter B after that. So. And
for some perspective there, when we're doing a job search now, we're probably talking to 4 or 5 different companies and recruiters that are presenting us with job offers. And
I think that's because we're a couple. Like, if you're a solo traveler, I think you're going to do fine with about 3.
Yeah, probably so.
Some people prefer to do 2. I would certainly do at least 2 to 3.
Yeah. And
if you're not finding what you're looking for and you think it's going to benefit you to open it up to a 4th or a 5th recruiter, that's fine. But some people feel like that's too much to juggle.
And yeah, I probably would say if I was a single traveler, there's no way I'll talk to 4 or 5. But we do need more job options in different locations, so we do talk to more. So yeah, if I was a single traveler, probably 3 would be good.
Yeah. So a couple more questions here, and if y'all have any more questions, please leave them in the comments.
Do you have a list of potential questions we should be asking these recruiters? I think we wrote an article about
We did, and I can share the article for you, Nikki. We wrote out a list of questions for you to ask the recruiter specifically, and then a list of questions to ask the company. So the company is going to be more things like their benefits, where they staff, what type of jobs they tend to see, when does their insurance start, that kind of thing. The recruiter, it's going to be things like, how long have you been doing this? How many travelers do you usually work with at the same time? And all that kind of stuff. Or when can I reach you on the weekends, during business hours? Is it okay if I text you? Do you prefer if I email you? Those types of questions.
Yeah.
But I'll share that article with you, Nikki.
Yeah. Okay. Sarah says, what's a typical timeline for reaching out to recruiters to starting a contract? It depends.
So usually we start searching, you want to be searching 6 to 8 weeks in advance.
It also depends on if you filled out paperwork with that company or not, because a company can't submit you for a job until you fill out their new hire paperwork, basically. So they need your profile on record in order to be able to submit you for a job. So you don't want to wait till last minute to reach out to a company, because then they have to have everything submitted before they can start sending you job offers, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when we started looking for recruiters, we started about 6 months ahead. Some people might say 6 months is a little bit early. I would say at minimum 3 months. 3 to 4 probably is good, is when you want to start reaching out to companies and getting to know them. So then you can take your time going through the companies, doing a few phone interviews, or just talking to a few recruiters and deciding which ones you like. I would say that would be between the 3 to 6 months out window that you'd want to be deciding. And then hopefully by 3 months out, you've decided on a couple of recruiters and companies that you would like to work with or stay in contact with, and you go ahead and get things submitted to build your profile at around that 3 month mark. So that might be, they need your resume, they need your references, they need you to just fill out your basic demographics and stuff. So then it's sitting there ready when you get to that 6 to 8 week mark, and they need to be submitting you for jobs.
Yeah, most jobs are going to pop up probably 4 to 6 weeks before the start date. So that's when it, 4 to 6 weeks before you need to start your job is when it kind of gets serious, and you want to be getting a lot of offers very quickly
from that point.
So Lisa says, my recruiter told me they get about 80% of the same jobs. Is that true? Yes, that's true, because the majority of jobs are on what's called a VMS, and that's basically a vendor that manages this list of jobs and submits people to these jobs on behalf of the companies, kind of. So a company will submit for a job, the vendor will then present the best applicants to the facility. So the majority of jobs are VMS jobs, but the other 20% sometimes are the ones that are really important, because like what we were talking about, we know a company in Virginia, North Carolina, where we've taken the majority of our recent contracts that has a ton of outpatient jobs, which is exactly what we're looking for. So sometimes those 20% that are exclusive contracts are, one, a lot of times are the highest paying, because if they don't go through that VMS, that vendor management system, they can keep a higher percentage of the bill rate, because that company, that VMS, takes a percentage of the pay rate, which means that VMS jobs usually pay less than a direct contract. So the 20% of those jobs are, a lot of times the best jobs. But yes, the majority of companies do have the same jobs, but that does not mean at all that they pay the same for those jobs. And that's another situation where you have to be careful, because a small company is going to be able to pay higher for that same VMS job than a big company, because they have less overhead. So yeah, they do have the same jobs.
Yeah, so we always say there's basically a lot of overlap, but there are going to be those outliers. So if you have 3 companies and all 3 of them have about 80% the same jobs, but then the outliers are those like 20% or so that they each have. So then maybe all 3 of them contact you at the same time and say, Lisa, I have an outpatient job in Phoenix, Arizona. Do you want it? But then if all 3 of them text you or email you at the same time, you need to say, okay, wait, let me make sure it's not all 3 the same job, because it might be. But then maybe the one also has a job, in Tucson, but the other 2 don't have a job in Tucson. So it's important that you communicate with all 3 to see, yes, you want to see collectively what they all have together. And then maybe you compare and say, well, is this one going to pay higher for the exact same job? And compare and contrast that. But then maybe if you hadn't been working with that third company, you never would have seen that other job in Tucson that the other 2 didn't have.
Yep.
So there is some overlap, but there's also outliers there. So we got a couple more questions coming in. Again, if y'all have more questions, feel free to ask.
Are we pretty much done with stuff we want to talk about?
We're pretty much done. We're going to take some questions. For those of you guys that are still watching or watching later, in addition to asking us questions, if you do want any recommendations for which companies we work with, you can feel free to just comment recruiter in the comments and we'll send you a message. You can also, on our website, we have something at traveltherapymentor.com. It's just called a recruiter request form on our website, and that's the best way for you guys to ask us for recommendations. Like we talked about earlier, there's not just 3 recruiters or 2 recruiters that we give to everybody. When you fill out the recruiter request form, it asks you about all your preferences, like which area of the country are you trying to go to, which settings are you interested in, what's most important to you, is it pay, is it mentorship, is it benefits, and we take into account all those factors, and then we give you recommendations based on that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the best way that we can help you guys steer in the right direction of which companies and recruiters might work best for your situation.
All right.
So a couple more questions here.
Okay, so Mallory said, did you both stick to settings you were most comfortable in and enjoyed, or keep things versatile to be able to be placed together? Good question. We have taken the vast majority of our jobs in outpatient ortho, which is what we prefer. So our top choice is always outpatient ortho, but obviously we always want 2 jobs in the same location, because we both want to be working up until this job. So yeah, we sometimes have settled on a setting that we didn't necessarily want in order to have 2 jobs in one location. But that has only been the case maybe, I think probably twice out of 12 contracts or so. So no, it's not very common. We normally stick with the setting we want because it's not worth it. We honestly would rather not work for a few weeks than to work in a setting we don't like. So yeah, we mostly stick with outpatient. We do like to switch things up sometimes and try other settings, but outpatient's definitely the clear choice for us.
Yep. And Mallory, if you want to reach out to us and message us afterwards, since you guys are thinking about traveling as a pair, we've written some articles and done some videos on traveling as a pair. There's so many factors that go into traveling as a pair, so we can definitely help you out with some information on that. Let's see. Someone else asked, do you have any info or experience working with school-based traveling? So we've never done school contracts ourselves, but we do have some information on it. There are certain companies that tend to get more school jobs than others. We've written an article about school-based traveling. I can share with you as well. It is possible you can work a full school year, or you can also, sometimes they will have needs for half or partial school years. So there's a lot of options there. We can send you some information on that.
All right.
So we had a couple people say Sarah was interested in the recruiters that we might recommend, so I will message you, Sarah. And then John said he also filled the form out on our website. John, I think I saw that in our email today, so I will respond.
We've been out of town this weekend, so we're a little bit behind on emails. But
so I'll respond to your email, John, either tonight or tomorrow. If anybody else is watching and you are interested in learning, some companies and recruiters that we would recommend for you personally, if you just want to comment recruiter, or you can go on our website at traveltherapymentor.com and fill out the recruiter request form. We do encourage you guys to, do as much research as possible, using some of these methods we talked about tonight. So just to recap, searching for reviews online to try to narrow down some companies that might be good is an option, as well as going based off recommendations from experienced travelers. We recommend you try to talk to travelers that have at least 1 or 2+ years of experience with more than one company, so they have more of a perspective, rather than taking advice from a new traveler or a classmate or a friend that has only worked with just a couple companies. And we do think that hopefully we can bring value to you guys by our 4+ years of experience and all the different companies we've talked to via our website, via our online business, not just the ones that we've taken contracts with, because we've only taken contracts with a few companies, but over 4.5 years of interviewing a couple dozen, we know a lot about a lot of companies. So hopefully we can steer you guys in the right direction of one that might work well for your situation.
And another thing to recap there is that the recruiter is a lot of times as important or more important than the company itself. So there's no easy answer to which travel company is the best.
Right.
There's a ton of factors. Even if there was one best travel company, it wouldn't be the best for everyone, because every situation is so different. So try to use your resources. Try to interview some companies on your own once you get some recommendations, because like I said, say you reach out to us or other people, you get some recommendations. Just because we thought they were good or those other people think they're good does not mean that they're the company for you. You have to also, do your research, ask them the questions, make sure they fit you well. And hopefully that's helpful. Thank you guys for joining in.
Thank you so much for joining in and asking so many good questions. We hope this information was valuable to you guys. If it was, again, if you could just give us a thumbs up. If you have friends that are interested in travel and they are wondering some of these same questions, just tag them in the comments or share this video with them so they can learn as well.
I'm going to link to the article that I wrote on this too. I put that was probably one of the longest articles I've ever written, so hopefully it'll be some different information, a lot of good information in there too.
Yep. So we will see you guys again next week. We are hoping that we will have our internet set up in our camper next week, so we'll see.
Not promising anything. We might be in this.
We might be in the Gold's parking lot again doing our video next week. I mean, this glow is kind of nice.
It is nice.
What do you guys think? So thank you again for joining us, and y'all have a good night.
Yep. Take care.
Bye.